On the Rollins thing, so they're not talking about making any capital contributions at the moment, so even if we move their operation to the existing facility, that leaves that field either vacant or substitutable for some other use. How does that fit into this program at all? As far as this movement
Right.
from
What Rollins would like to do, and has talked about doing, is they want a lacrosse field, so that site will likely become their lacrosse stadium as well as the ladies softball stadium on that site.
So, in effect, we're providing them a new field opportunity, moving activity that they otherwise have to figure out and do it some other way.
Correct. Now, obviously, they've already got their softball stadium, so that's an extra cost for them to move that stadium. And lacrosse, they basically decided they're going to just continue to share the existing soccer field there in front of the college. They don't like that, they don't like to share.
It's not large enough for women's lacrosse, so kind of that requires a large one.
But
That's the largest
But
sited field.
they have plans to expand it on that
They do,
site.
but it basically,
It'd be tight.
it goes up to Fairbanks, it kisses the president's office, and it kisses the internal road.
So, but that capital stack, I mean, maybe my math is off, but $2 million from the team, and let's say Rollins is a phenomenal bond, and it's $1 million, $1.5 million. And even if it's in the CRA, that still only gets me to $7 or $8 million. Am I wrong?
For the stadium,
Sorry?
only for the stadium.
Right, you still haven't paid for land or parking.
Let me ask one really simple question. Is on the Webster site, I know the notion of banning CRA would be an ethnic to Orange County. Let me pose a very simple hypothetical. Especially since you pointed out the tech site, which of course is its own problem, but physically it's located well to the question I'm going to pose. You said the CRA might have to be expanded 2 years to accommodate the full benefit of what's associated with the revenues on a monthly basis. It would seem to me that because the tech site's already a non-tax paying site, just picking up that one corner, extending the CRA plan to be a very, very easy thing to do. And I can't imagine anybody would have part farm over what's effectively just a swap, allow the CRA revenues to go into that area. I see the smile when you got there, so you were waiting.
We've had that conversation and potentially we even trade them, take off the Harper Shepherd Hill site, which is also another non-tax paying site of roughly the same size that we could swap. And so from their precedent setting standpoint to other communities, all we've done is traded out two non-taxable. Right. Now, they haven't said yes to this, obviously, and there'll be a process to get that, but there's some, there's certainly a reasonable ask there.
I'm not sure if I heard, what's the revenue from the team? What's the lease agreement, potentially?
It depends. Depends if they've got.
That's Rollins, so.
They put, well, I mean, so look at what a stadium generates. A minor league, there's naming rights. There's potentially lease from the actual field. If you get an upfront capital, you may not get the lease, so that's negotiable. Then you have, the income streams that come from the stadium are whatever concessions that occur, et cetera. I'm talking during the baseball season. And whatever ticket sales occur. And then, I'm sorry, advertising, I think I mentioned naming rights for the stadium, et cetera. And then obviously whatever opportunity there is to potentially use the stadium non-baseball season.
So,
Concerts.
using those other models, so there's however many, 30 other little small cities that do this. Is there an average that the local government who owns a stadium gets in revenue?
No, there isn't. And the difference, I think, between probably the other stadiums that are out there versus this stadium is, you know, we ultimately are in a much larger metropolitan area that has a different pull. I don't know that, you know, that the symphony plays at the Daytona Beach Stadium, for example. Whereas if they went out to a venue for an event, that might be something that's ideal in fall here, you know. So that's a different kind of opportunity, I think, from that sense.
I guess my question then, to be clear, is you don't factor that in, or you are figuring that out? Is it a nominal amount?
We're figuring that out.
We're
We're
figuring it out.
figuring it out, and
We-
it's not, it is not a nominal amount, and ultimately, for me, it's the return on investment on what would be something over and above what you would look at to cost to acquire to park. I mean, ultimately, this is first and foremost, the economic benefit that comes from a place like this is outside of the park. And that's what you have to look at this, is ultimately, is that a good economic benefit for something outside of the park? I think if most municipalities figure out a way to have some return and or break even for the amenity, they probably are ahead of the game.
We've asked our consultant, we're using Mike Thiessen out of Chicago with the Madison Group, and he's done quite a few, usually tri-party agreements between, and the reason we brought him in is the original relationship between the county, city, Rollins, and the owners. We have asked him, since Rollins has somewhat shifted out of the picture, to get re-involved with regard to the city and the owners and the deal terms involved with that. Regionally, it's not going to affect that $6 million regional revenue stream that we would anticipate. I've asked him to narrow that down a little bit to what, no, when you look at the modeling for these types of stadiums, because it's not just Winter Park residents who are going to come to these baseball games, it's going to be pulling in from our neighboring communities. But I have asked him to whittle that down into more of a Winter Park analysis. And also, one of the things we have to take out of the picture is Rollins being a significant player in the deal terms. We also know that the study he originally did was, when we were pretty involved with Rollins, was on the Harper Shepherd site. And I've asked him to be looking at these other sites as opportunities as well. So I don't think the $6 million regional number is going to change. What I do want is, and I know that there's a interest in that return on investment and when that return may occur. And so I really want to take that $6 million and try to whittle it down. I think if we look, and you've heard the mayor and Randy talk about it, if we look at the anticipated taxable value coming in from the development around a stadium in most of these locations, that itself is return that would be coming back to the city just from what we anticipate coming in around the stadium itself. The one thing that, you build a stadium for a lot of reasons, not the least of which it is a community amenity, but there also has to be a way that amenity can be financed. So that's part of what we're looking for. And we recognize the delta. I think on the public side, if we use city land, we have no land costs per se. If we use private land, we would have land costs, but there is that opportunity for private dollars to be incorporated into the deal. And those have their own balances that we've got to evaluate.
The acquisition of parkland in the city alone, which is part of our comprehensive plan and other things to continue to do, would be expensive just by itself.
So the acquisition of parkland would be the Providage scenario?
Providage.
And the fish.
The fish.
Oh, right.
Specifically. Yeah. And I actually don't think Harper Shepherd is on our park list.
How long would the team?
Harper Shepherd's on the purpose.
Right, because it has to be owned by the city.
Private.
The Winter Pines Golf Course is not on the Parks List either, because it's privately owned.
Harper Shepherd is Is that the truth, is that MLK?
No, Harper Shepherd is.
Harper Shepherd's Red Rollins, yeah.
Orange, okay.
But they'd be keeping that in because they'd be using, turning it into a crossroads, so that wouldn't be an additive. So really, Fish and Robin House would be, this would be additive.
How long is the team obligated to stay?
They talked about a 20-year lease.
I got, you have the answer to this, but obviously, someone would question traffic and how it impacts neighborhoods. So it doesn't seem like 2,000 people is a huge number considering, you may just want to compare what we do in other places. I mean, it's obviously not the art festival where we have 250,000 people, but is it the Valentine's concert? You know, I mean, what does that look like in downtown? Not, it doesn't overly impact. So there may be some scenarios where you can say, here's what 2,000 people look like.
I'm not even sure it's 2,000. If you're 1 to 3.2, you're anticipating.
I'm saying 2,000 people.
You're
so
talking
talking 800
600 cars or 800 cars.
Yeah, and you look at, I think we look at
1,000
it from the parking, you know, what's the impact of parking to the ability to park is really the impact.
And most of these games start at 6:30 during the week and I think 5 o'clock.
4 o'clock
4 o'clock
on
on Sundays. So it's, you know, it's a little bit of an off-peak time.
I mean, you guys all live in Winter Park mainly. I can tell you driving home at 6:30 out of Winter Park, it's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
We wish people were coming to Winter Park at that time.
If you compare to what could be built on the same 6 acres, it's probably less of an impact
Right.
than what could be built there.
Sure.
So, now, not within a 30, 45-minute period like that, obviously, but on a daily basis, it's less of an impact than it could be.
How important is that bowling alley property to that scenario?
The bowling alley is not critical to that scenario. It helps, but I think as a property the city ultimately would like to own anyway, for the purpose the mayor said earlier. Ultimately, we would like to add a lane in that block of Fairbanks. And without acquiring at least a portion of all those properties, that's going to be very challenging to ever do. But to open that view, that vista off of Fairbanks into the park would also, I think, really beautify that area.
If you look at, and put baseball aside for a moment, just look at the economic engines that are starting to form in our area. Obviously, the Kmart Plaza is new on our horizon. As you know, Kmart's closing and something's going to happen there. I don't think any of us know yet what that is. The Denning-Morse 1792 corridor is hot based on activity. So, you know, I for one would love to see the ML King Park expanded and really created as not something that's forgotten behind everything that's happening, but something that really almost becomes Central Park-like from New York, that things are built around it, they create a great amenity. Fairbanks is maybe warm to lukewarm at this point. Obviously, with what you've done and what we want to do at the commission level and the investments that we made there, we will see that take off over time. So, you know, this I guess you would say this northwest corridor of Winter Park is starting to have a lot of economic activity in it. Just with the new Heritage Park site, the apartments across from the village, with the Aquaterra project there at the old DMV site, you know, that area is starting to have a lot of economic development. And, you know, I think park acquisition as part of that to me is important ultimately, or we're going to have, you know, a lot of apartment complexes that our comprehensive plan will permit and not much else.
I mean, is this the tree farm, is that contingent upon the baseball thing, or are we pursuing that regardless?
Ultimately, we'll do that regardless.
That feel, I mean, having lots of kids who struggle with the MLK Park because there's just the usage is so heavy, I think that would be a huge win.
I think that in and of itself is a great economic driver. When you think about the big areas where people go play for cost tournaments.
Oh, man.
And I mean, there's one out in Osceola County.
We're out there all the time.
Yeah.
We just built one privately, one of my developments. We have eight rectangular fields plus a small little utility building plus parking. It's sits on about 30 acres. And,
Huge.
literally just started, MLS will be doing their winter training there and some other things and utilizing hotel rooms, but that, it's a bit of a different model. What I can tell you from, what compelled us to build those was there was no shortage of demand. There was more of a supply shortage in quality facilities than there is. So I think the tree park is very exciting to be part of the discussion. If you were to put something like that online, I think that would be an absolute great enhancement to our parklands. And I think it would get lots of utilization and, we could figure out as a community how we want to prioritize usage. So maybe people don't have to travel all the way to Winter Springs to play soccer if they're residents and things like that.
The byproduct of this project, if and when we're obviously going to make a decision to do something or not to do something. And even if we choose to not do something because the exact stadium funding is not there or whatever, the byproduct for me of, especially looking at the northwest quadrant of our city and looking at moving parts and even making potentially strategic decisions, for example, I'm not sure that we would have even discussed the acquisition potentially of the bowling alley if we weren't thinking about baseball. You know what, if baseball wasn't on the table today and I had, should we acquire this for parklands, this would have been a 30-second conversation. You just said, of course. If I brought to you, should we have looked at a Fairbanks improvement from 1792 to Orange? 45-second conversation. You just said, of course. So the benefit to me of the conversation that we've already had, even looking at what's going to happen in potentially the Votech site, I'm not suggesting that it was baseball alone that brought this conversation to the table, but the Votech site is now in play. And that is important, I think, for us as a city to get ahead of and make sure we want what's best for our city coming out of this. So, already the benefit, not to mention, the things that have been rumored for a long time, Rollins obviously wants our library ultimately for Crummer, and, we've danced around that issue for years, and where does the library go? This creates a lot of moving parts, but it really also, I would say, surfaces multiple issues that are out there that whether or not we do baseball or not, we need to have on our table, on our watch list, because we could wake up 5 years from now and things could have happened around us and we could be in a much worse place with or without baseball. Or we could really now say, where do we want to kind of steer our future? Where do we want to see happen on some of these key development sites? What are we willing to negotiate on? Where are we not willing to negotiate? I think the worst thing that could happen in our city is that Rovidash sits empty, that the Votech continues to expand with trailers. Those are if you go to 35,000 feet and look down, you realize we've really got some opportunity. And right now, baseball is a catalyst to have those conversations. But to me, baseball is also an opportunity. This has been an opportunity for all of us to stretch our thinking and start to accept the realities that are happening economically around us, and guide that instead of be, I would suggest, a victim of that.
So Mayor, in front of we started this meeting asking us whether it's a good idea. Obviously, you can't answer that without all the details, just if you won't be able to. But in the commission meeting coming up, what's in front of you? I know there's a 45-day window of your kind of exploring things. Are you trying to narrow it down to potential sites?
I think what you're seeing happening, I let Dory and Randy certainly speak for this, but what I believe we have in terms of the permission from the commission is to obviously explore this, before the next 45 days. If we don't have money for a stadium, we don't have money for a stadium. If we can't find that, it's a no-brainer. We're not going to sit here and belabor something that we don't have money for. So if there aren't other opportunities of sources of funding, public, private, whatever, that come to the table, I guess I would say that concludes the conversation at this point. The byproduct conversations, though, that are already starting to come from this, as I've said, I think are important to our city, irregardless of whether baseball comes around. So I've identified two of those. The third would be the tree farm. The tree farm needs to be, we need to advance that more quickly rather than less quickly as a city. We do need to worry about what's happening in Rovidash from an economic development standpoint. There's a lot of you know, it's on the fence right now. There's a lot of things that could happen one way or the other, and it either is gonna get an injection of something that kick starts it, makes it big, or it's gonna languish for a while. So those are the kind of things that I think right now that we have the opportunity to look at. So yes, you know, as I said in the beginning, as I've seen this, there's three major deal points: site acquisition, and you've seen what those are. And each one has its opportunities and its challenges. Obviously, I think the last two sites Randy has identified have tremendous opportunities to jumpstart other economic development. You know, the ML King site as well as the current Harper Shepherd site are probably, you would consider these civic amenities that we. So site is one. The second is obviously the rest of the funding. And funding can occur in multiple ways. I mean, we have, you know, some funds in water, sewer, other places that from a development standpoint to allow us to expand our acreage, our park acreage, which has benefits, by the way, in numerous ways in our city. Economically, too, it has advantages from our comprehensive plan. It allows us to potentially expand and do other things. You know, using some of our funds for that could be a good thing. And then last but not least is whatever the deal that would be related, you know, if there's no groom, a bride, there's no team that wants to be here. This conversation's moved to. You know, I would suggest probably after researching this, you know, kind of extensively over the last little bit, you know, the stadium deal point is the most difficult sticking point. And it's a question of, do we get a good return for that? Is it a good thing for our city? And this is where I think the partnerships from multiple entities, including potentially the county, are important. But the byproduct conversations, to me, have already been worth the journey.
Quick question. Is there a window of opportunity for Brevard, the manatees, to move, or are there other municipalities thinking about such a thing, or is it this just because of the circumstances as well as everything else that has come before?
The Brevard, you may know, their major league team, the spring trains there, the Nationals, has already announced their league, which puts a huge burden on the minor league team now to take care of that stadium. Major league teams take care of the stadium. So they're looking to move down.
This is a crazy deal, John, because if we had and I don't know that it fits in our city, or do we have the wherewithal, but if we had the wherewithal to say we'd like to be in the spring training business, there's probably $50 to $70 million at the state level that we could tap tonight. So it is a kind of an interesting challenge to be in. You know, if you look at, I was just in the Phoenix market, if you look at what Phoenix has done in their area to expand, you know, spring training, it's remarkable. I mean, it's been a gigantic economic engine, and they probably are surrounded by 10 winter parks that have done it. Scottsdale, Tempe, a lot of the other communities that are around it. So, you know, we're blessed because, you know, team ownership lives here. So team ownership would love to have a hometown in its hometown. Guaranteed if we don't take the opportunity up, either someone in Central Florida or somebody in the state will. I mean, this is,
I think your question-
this is a very, very coveted thing. This is, I mean, this is highly coveted.
Are other cities courting the team? He has had offers from other cities. He wants it to be here at this point. But if he can't make the numbers work, then he's not going to stay in the bar because it's too expensive for him.
And sadly, the
And so
economy
he would probably sell the team to one of the other markets.
There also are economic benefits, you know, of AA or AAA. That is a fascinating, because Randy and I have both, you know, learned a lot about baseball, including the orientation of professional fields, which I think about. They're always in that southwest corner facing northeast. the fact that Major League Baseball and minor league baseball enjoy, I guess you would say, protected status by our Congress, and that these are franchises at the end of the day, there's a tremendous worth to a team to be in Central Florida, because if that ever does ascend up the ranks from high A to something else, the economic benefit to the owners, which might be something we could even negotiate in to our contract, in and of itself could be very valuable, very lucrative.
Which is another challenge to some of these sites, because it went from single A to double A to triple A, now instead of a 3,500 seat stadium, you need a
Probably-
6,000
you
seat
probably
stadium or
could.
something.
In whatever.
Disney has,
Right.
Right.
Are there any lessons to be learned from what was previously a AAA team that was located in the Tinkerfield Central Citrus Bowl?
Never triple A, double A and single A, obviously. I think the team left in 1982 or 83, if memory serves me, or was it 92? 92.
The Marlboro Man came down.
I mean, I think that your question is rock solid. I would just say that they're probably ancient lessons at this point. If you look at what's happened in minor league baseball from 1992 to the present, and I'm talking about other communities, Biloxi, Greenville, South Carolina, you go down the list, that these sites have all become economic engines for something else happening positive in your city. And at the end of the day, I don't know what the right term would be for the Tinkerfield site, but it's been overshadowed by the football soccer stadium. There's been a lot of investment now, a couple $100 million investment that's going to go into that, and I don't know that it's ever been looked at. I mean, it's a historic site. I don't know that it's ever been looked at as what can happen around it. The Fenway Park Wrigley Field model, frankly, is where a lot of the new development is going. Is saying you got a city park at the end of the day and surrounded by lots of good stuff happening. So, the lessons I learned from it, obviously, is I think that this region, obviously we've lived 22 years without minor league baseball, so I guess we can survive another 22 if that does happen. But, I think that there was something that happened when minor league baseball was in Central Florida that was positive. And just if you look at the economic benefit, by the way, Winter Park's an attractive place for a lot of former Major League Baseball players. A lot of that occurred because they all came down in spring training initially. So, there's side benefits to this, but I don't know that there's anything particularly to learn from Tinker.
And one of those benefits, I mean, obviously not measurable, but long before I was thinking about economic development was Tinkerfield for me and my brothers and my dad.
Yeah.
Going to those games, and there's a real sense of community that
Huge sense of.
those fields bring out.
I mean, to think that, you and I watched Hank Aaron play there at Rod Carew, and I mean, that in and of itself has some psychic value. I don't know that it has $15 million of psychic value, but it has some psychic value. I mean, and it has some psychic value for generations to come.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the question of it doesn't sound like we have something to act on. However, I'm curious to know the timing of, do we get back together when there's a little bit more concrete recommendation? I would also openly invite any of you, to present to my board in advance or after or whatever appropriate, because I think that would be a good group to hear from.
The challenge, and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, the challenge is gonna be where, part of the funding mechanism we need to deal with is exactly where we're gonna put it. In the CRA, we've got $5 to $6 million. Outside of the CRA, we don't have CRA money to use. So I think that there's some of that. What I would suggest to the chair and to Randy and the mayor is, and to the rest of the board, is as we get more facts, we just call a special meeting and ask you guys to get together and come in and listen to what we found, and maybe that happens right before we hit that period of the 45 days and get to the city
In
commission.
the next 20 days.
Yeah,
or
so probably around the time of your normal second meeting, I think we're looking at the end of February to go back to the commission, so we can certainly put another meeting together of this group.
Did you,
And-
Gordon, did you mention that the consultant, I guess it's the consultant, going to go through this? Are they going to update the financial
Yeah,
aspects? of this?
I
That's an
have him,
important part of it.
there's things that the consultant is doing for us. He is looking at preliminary terms with the team. He's looking at the funding, he's looking at the return to the city. He's also looking at the stadium and what would be the minimum requirements of the stadium and what would be, what would be the Cadillac version. He's also looking at our demographics. One of the most important things when we talk about what brings baseball in and makes baseball big business is the demographics of where they're pulling. The demographics in Winter Park are certainly more attractive than demographics in Orlando, believe it or not.
That's
And
College
it-
Park,
And
Baldwin
that's the
Park,
region that we would be
Maitland,
pulling into.
Castleberry, I mean, that's the.
So when you look at that Seminole, South Volusia, Lake, North Orange demographic that would pull in, those are certainly attractive as they go through. So that's part of what he's looking at as well. And then I really want him, as I mentioned earlier, to look at narrowing down that $6 million rate of return to what Winter Park would gain. But a lot of ROI is going to be based on what our deal terms are with the team. And I'm not going to know that until we, Mike Thiessen has a habit of saying, you can, are you a little bit pregnant? and I'm a little nervous about going into our relationship with the team until we know whether, the commission's not ready to commit to that. So, we can run some numbers based on various scenarios with the team as to what our ROI will be, but that's going to really be what the owner wants. And what the owner wants right now is really, he wants concessions, he wants tickets, and he wants advertising and naming rights. And so that's pretty much the whole package.
I would think we could put a value on that pretty quickly, though, based on historic trends in other
Right.
marketplaces. That all seems to be mathematics as opposed to.
Right,
And-
so
and-
that's what Mike is, we've asked Mike to come in and from a specific baseball standpoint.
And rest assured, your city staff or this mayor is not going to do anything stupid. We're not, this is ultimately going to have to be a good business deal. There's some psychic value that comes from it. There's some community pride in various things that obviously there will be a value. And frankly, Mark, there's probably a value for that too. But it's not a $15 million value. That might be a $2 million value. But so there'll be some value that comes from some of those things. But yeah, this has to work on multiple levels. And I think ultimately it's got to drive other economic development, or else we've added a good amenity, but we probably could have accomplished the same thing by adding another kind of amenity.
I think one of the things the study says very well is that it's beyond, it's well as an experience, right? It's entertainment, it's not, you're going to see balls and strikes. And I think so when you talk about cost, this has to be a great experience because I think people in Park get, we perceive, demand. It's got to be a great environment, it's got to feel great. It doesn't have to necessarily be a Cadillac, but it certainly can't be tricycle.
Right,
Well
right.
said.
I think that's important. I think that it's always been the charge of this board, though, to study the economic impact of these ventures and these thoughts and these concepts. And clearly, all of those things have value. The intrinsic value, the quality of life values certainly deserve to be scored up and have points. But I think that the recommendation from the commission was to let staff continue to study it. I don't know at this point in time that this board could have any other type of a recommendation. I do think it has a lot of issues with it. I think we also have a lot of resources in town that we could tap into beyond Madison. I think Dino McHugh is a resident, and he owns the Denver Zephyrs, I think, or did for a very long period of time. I believe it was a AA or a AAA team. And so he has a model, and I think there's other people that can participate and have that conversation. But it seems to me that we have a lot of
Mark, it'd be great.
money raising to do.
It'd be great to have those kind of people at the table because they probably in less than 45 days can go, oh, go here, go there, or you're nuts. I mean, they I'm sure have access to things. And that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation with you all was if this is going to happen, it's ultimately going to have other partners at the table, such as the gentleman you referenced, that would be positive.
I do think that, we've had a couple of, in my business, I've had some experiences with major league teams wanting to relocate. And on the major league level, it has always been kind of, here's the way we're going to do it. And there hasn't been a lot of give and take, as evidenced by the Nationals' last try in Osceola County, where I think that they were told in several meetings that if they went for that dollar amount, probably would have a very tough time, and still did. Just went right through the noise and ended up, they announced they're moving, but I don't know that they've announced the place where they're moving to. So maybe they're not moving so quick.
And that's a lesson
But-
for our city. I mean, you know, we often talk about what happens in development in this community and what is or isn't done for development. You know, I would much rather try and not accomplish it and learn lots of lessons, because frankly, the process has already taught us lots of lessons, which I think are very powerful for our city. You know, if this was a 250 seat movie theater, you'd all be looking at this totally differently. That could bring 2,500 people to this community every night, and nobody would give a damn about it, you know, at the end of the day. So this has the benefit to do lots of different things. And that's something that, you know, that's where the lessons are being learned and will continue to be learned and will benefit our city for years.
You know, I think the peak utilization time that you're playing with in terms of generating additional receipts within the community, especially if you think people are going to go to restaurants and other things. I mean, you know, summer season here is generally slower for our merchants. So I think that there is some value there to look at that. It's kind of the hotel you're going to be coming out saying, you know, where are our need dates? These guys are playing over the summer, and I would tell you there's probably several people that are absentee within the community during the summer, me included, so, for a large part, so. You know, I know the restaurant people that we frequent, you know, their receipts go down in the summer. Now with plays between 6:30 and 10, I don't know that, you know, they're going to benefit a tremendous amount, but in baseball, you might go for 3 or 4 innings too, and then go on. It's not something that you might be dedicated to the whole 9-inning event, or you might show up in the 5th inning and watch the end. So I do think that there is some value. I don't know that all of those values that Madison might report would be 100% incremental, because people in Winter Park are going out anyways and using restaurant venues, but I'd be interested to see what Madison has to say about that kind of stuff. So are we looking for, I guess, are we looking for a
I'm not-
recommendation, or is it just
Wherever
a
you
workshop?
guys, and wherever you guys want to go with it.
When's our next meeting scheduled compared to the commission meeting? And Randy, do you think you're, at this point, again, it's probably pretty early, you may be able to weed out some of the options, but do you expect that you'll have a spreadsheet type of A, B, C, and D, we're recommending D?
That's the plan.
We're not gonna go forward if we don't have them. I mean, and that ultimately would be something that
But I mean, my point is you're going to analyze all of them and recommend,
A site, hopefully, I'm recommending a site, or,
and the commission may then weigh in on why that sign is good.
right, the recommendation may be, we can't do this.
Right.
I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
if we looked at it and there's a $15 million shortfall, and we don't.
But we should do the tree farm for children. You know, that might be the recommendation that comes from this process, or we should really seek to acquire the bowling alley, because that would be really important to our city. So, like I said, the benefits that are already coming from this conversation are numerous, even if we don't build a baseball stadium.
Your next scheduled meeting is on the 18th.
So that'd be right before.
Right, the commission meeting will be on the 24th.
Okay.
I can always, depending, and a lot of it depends on when we get the data that we get. A 35-day window, we are really working as hard as we can to get as much as we can. I would ask you all, maybe we leave this open to, if I get enough information on the 11th to report out, we can move the meeting to the 11th, or we can keep it on the 18th, depending on how much information we have.
Okay, but for now, we keep the 18th.
The 18th, right?
Regular schedule.
And when those reports are available, you'll be happy to, can you distribute them to this board if prior to the 18th, under the agreements that you're under?
No, we are not under any, at this point in time, we are not under any economic development exemption agreement, so,
And the Madison
It
report is
will-
being commissioned by us.
Yes, any additional work by medicine.
I don't know any reason why that
So we can-
information couldn't be distributed.
If we can distribute it as soon as. we
Because it was
can.
helpful to get the study. I've had it for a couple weeks and,
Right.
been able to kind
Yeah.
of read through it and pair it up. so.
No, all of that now this is all public information.
Any other thoughts you'd like to, anybody got any great ideas where to go for money?
Who's got $10 million?
I do, I'm not sure, I'm not, maybe the folks that we were speaking to previously, you said that the funds of the state are only for spring training. My understanding is that it was for professional sports. When you fully expand out, now they might redesire us for spring training, but my understanding is that that statute reads for professional sports.
We met with them last February, so it's been 11 months, and as the mayor said, they said if you're a spring training site, we've got a program in place to get your money. It's minor league baseball, we really don't have a process, and it would be, like another ask of the state to, now something may change.
Now's the time to ask, we're about to
No,
go into
but-
session.
As the president that represents.
But we have friends in this,
Right.
Yeah.
the governor's a friend of this
Right.
city, the Senate president's obviously a friend of this city, and for tremendous public amenities, I'm sure we have their interest.
And I was on, spent a lot of last week talking to our lobbyists, and, on what different ways to carve this, and, you look at the VOTEC site, for example, and they need a replacement school, can the state take care of that component? There's a lot of different ways the money's fungible.
Could you leave it there and make it
Right.
vertical? Have both?
That's what they actually,
And that would make,
that's the thought, yes. And so,
get outlaw trailers. Make it shape.
I don't know, we haven't approached the foundations, for example, to see if they're interested in this type of thing. Just, if you have thoughts on those types of things, we certainly love to hear.
Well, thank you for your diligence.
Well, thank you for your consideration. Again, this is one of those things that I believe is a generational opportunity that we cannot ignore. And I also believe the benefits that come from our conversations will outweigh baseball. And that's, to me, the greatest lesson, I think, is that when you give an opportunity, you're not going to hit, Major League All-Star players don't hit 1,000.
You're happy
Mark,
with that?
developers, do they hit 1,000? I don't know, you
Maybe
hit more than
100.
500. But, you hit, and you sometimes have to be up at the plate when you can't get there. And that teaches you lessons on what to do the next time you're at the plate. So, though I think that this is a strong opportunity we have to consider. There's too many pluses. Obviously, the money at the end of the day is important.
I think for the layperson like myself, when you put things in context, it also helps. When you said adding a 12-screen movie theater, all of a sudden, wow, that comparing to actual baseball stadium and the amount of traffic. So as you go through this, think about us simple-minded folks who, think about traffic, think about those sort of things, and put them in the context of what it looks like. Because when you hear Major League Baseball, you think big and grand and everything else. But when you put it in the context of it's an extra lane, or it's not a 12,
Baseball's played in a park.
Yeah.
The object is to go home where you're safe.
and it's
Waiting all-
from living in
all year for that
Sarasota, it's a great model too, so.
We're happy to do road trips. We have all talked about that. There's a great model, and Vince Gull's got a fantastic team model, and that's been something we've been looking at. So there's a lot of great models out there.
Any other discussions from the panel or the board? Mayor, thank you very
Thank
much
you very
for
much.
taking the time to appear before us.
Appreciate all you're doing. You're a gentleman in our community. We appreciate you